How's the weather like in Australia?
It is very hot. I was just telling Lucille it was 40 degrees over the weekend.
Ew! It's even hotter in the islands.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Lucille mentioned that it wasn't too humid though over the weekend. It was quite
very
humid
humid
here.
for us.
Oh, right,
Very
okay.
humid.
Yeah.
Hot and sticky and so we don't want to leave our office's aircon.
Yeah. No, fair enough.
Okay.
All right, welcome everyone who has joined our webinar. Lovely to see you all. So on the call so far, we have Lucille Chute from Fiji and Ramona Tugaga from Samoa. So we're just gonna wait another 1 or 2 minutes for more people to join us, and then I'll start the session. And feel free to use the chat function to share which country that you are calling in from. I'm calling in from the country of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation of Sydney. And I would like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I want to acknowledge that sovereignty was never ceded and that this land that I'm on has always been Aboriginal land and will always be Aboriginal land. So yeah, feel free to use the chat function to let us know where you are calling from. All right, just gonna share a video. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us from wherever you are in the world today. My name is Ezreena Yahya. I am the digital campaigner at ActionAid Australia. It is my pleasure to introduce two wonderful women activists on the call today. We have Lucille Chute. She is calling in from Fiji. Lucille works with Transcend Oceania, and she leads the Secretariat of the Global Partnership for the Prevention of Armed Conflict in the Pacific. So welcome, Lucille. Lovely to have you here.
Hi, Ezreena. Thank you.
On the call, we also have the wonderful Ramona Tugaga. Ramona is representing YWCA Samoa. She is the co-founder and program director of the Latin Crisis Center in Samoa. Welcome, Ramona. We lovely to have you here.
Talofa from Samoa. It's great to be, an honor to be on this panelist today.
Lovely.
Nice to see you all. Hello, Lucille.
Hi, Ramona.
Wonderful. So it is no secret that 2020 has been a challenging year for us. We are ready to hit reset and pave the way for women to rise in 2021. So this year we have watched crisis after crisis unfold. Women working in informal or casual jobs have faced the worst impacts of COVID lockdowns with no income or social protection. Women have taken on increased care and responsibilities in the home as schools shut down, and tragically for many, violence in the home has also increased. And climate change has also compounded these challenges, bringing cyclones of increased intensity and impact, including Tropical Cyclone Harold, which impacted the Pacific region. But in the Pacific, young women are rising to the challenge, and they are leading their communities through crisis towards a brighter future for everyone. So today we get to help invest in women to rise, reset the world, and reshape our future. So today you can help ActionAid invest in 500 women leaders on the front lines of injustice to fight for their rights and create a fairer future for everyone. And every dollar that you donate today will be matched by a generous supporter. So with your support, women can rebuild the world. I would also like to invite you to ask any questions in the chat box. And I am sure Lucille and Ramona will be happy to answer any of those questions. Great. So let's start off with the Q&A. Lucille, as a young Pacific woman, I was curious to know what are some of the challenges that you have faced this year, and how has the twin crises of COVID-19 and climate change impacted your community in Fiji?
Thank you. So speaking of my experience and of young women activists here in Fiji and the Pacific, this year, 2020, was most challenging due to COVID-19. Women of all ages, young and old, were most affected, specifically within the areas of social and economic security that is further impacted with climate and environment change. Across the Pacific, foremost here in Fiji, as we were the first in the Pacific to be affected with COVID-19, beginning in March and onwards, young women lost employment and jobs at different levels of business, most especially at the commercial and private sectors with the shutdown of the tourism industry. As young women engaging at community and regional interventions, it was difficult to maintain communications with colleagues and sisters and friends across the regions. Costs of communication and staying connected were a challenge that mostly affected women's priorities in budgetary concerns. Young women and diverse groups returning to rural life and farming in the villages, back to the rural and having to start fresh and anew with no option but farming, and above all that, facing the major challenges of access to land and resources. COVID-19 also prioritized distancing and isolation. And this, for persons living with disability, brought in a new level of fear and trauma. During this time, as young women activists working at the forefront of disaster and climate change, friends and colleagues shared with me their priorities, concerns, and fear of being in isolation and distancing, especially for those that need a caregiver at all times. For example, earlier this year, a mother of a young woman living with disabilities shared with me that her daughter needs a full-time caregiver, but with COVID-19, she had to leave her job at the market, which is their only source of income, to be a caregiver to her daughter due to social distancing and lockdown. This issue also gave rise to a different level of environment change. Other businesses that promote equality and rights of women and women of diverse groups with creative source of income were affected. Young women, most of all this year, are faced with poverty and challenges to support their human security and day-to-day needs. So the major challenge for me is when women are affected, it also incur on their continual engagements in peace-building interventions. For this, I call on development partners and donors to engage proactively to support young women. Thank you.
Thanks, Lucille. That's a really powerful call to action. We hear your message loud and clear. Lucille, you mentioned previously that young women in Fiji are using information and communications to better prepare and respond to disasters such as TC Harold, such as COVID-19. Could you share some of the examples of some of the technology that you have used?
So last week we had our regional young women's training of trainers, and information and communication was discussed during this training. And in this training, we also visited the Fiji Meteorological Center and learned about how they gather their information on the weather. And this was very helpful and important for us as young women, because we learned the importance of being prepared when the warnings is given out. And also they mentioned that it's given out 3 weeks in advance of any disaster. So through this training, we also noted that persons living with disability were usually left behind with information and communication to their disaster preparedness. And this brought up conversations on how we as Pacific young women can be the voice to change and shift the political power for the disaster preparedness response and recovery as well. So in this training of trainers, we created in our different regional hubs young women's call to action. And we see this as an important document for positive outcomes, something that we can use to be that call to change that we can use at different levels of decision making.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Lucille. And Ramona, I'm also curious to hear what you have to share about the young women in Samoa. So Ramona, you are the co-founder and program director at the Latin Crisis Center in Samoa, and you have extensive experience in organizing training and guidance for young women to lead their communities. Could you tell us, what young women in Samoa have been doing this year in response to COVID-19?
Thank you, Ezreena, and hello again to our spectators in our meeting. Okay, for young women in Samoa, we have been, well, let's just start with COVID. The COVID has really shifted our focus and our responses in different ways in all our gender, especially with our young women. So our young women are now the most challenging people in the families in our structure in Samoa, where our parents and our children are depending on. So we have been grouping ourselves and teaming up in communities, in churches, where everyone is it's connected to. We have initiated and revived some projects that is useful for every young woman to work on during this COVID period. Samoa recently we had 2 cases of COVID. So confirmed, but they are isolated. So we've been trained on, we've been building our capacity learning, we've been building awareness on how to respond to COVID for quite some, since March, because since March, we have never had any COVID until now. Just before Christmas, they decided to come to ruin our poor COVID-free country. So anyways, but the young women has been working hard in every sectors, in every village. We've had these incentives where we work together with other women's committee and other stakeholders, where we build gardens. We have so many vegetable gardens for them to fall back to. With the climate change coming up now, we've been working through our reviving all our organic and farming and living a healthy environment, given the situation, because this time last year, Samoa was really hit bad with our measles epidemic, which claimed almost 100, more than 100 lives of children. And since then, we have the young women, we teamed up most of our young women, not just the YWCA, but um, we are leading all the young women organizations in our country in order to fight back and to assist with this epidemic. And now this pandemic, we are even more cautious and still working really hard on the ground to make sure that it doesn't really affect us and that our families are well cared for. There is a huge demand of home carers and daycares and babysitters and all that, and as well as the old age carers. So, and also a huge fallout of employment of many women, not young women, but many women who have lost so many jobs with so many industry in the tourism closed down. So now we have initiated this other program where we train them to become, at least some skills into home care to assist with their financial support. So that's what we've been busy with on my end, and it's been great to have every support from every other women's organization, their leaders, and also our leaders to support us in the work that we are trying to do.
Thanks so much, Ramona. Thanks for sharing. So Lucille mentioned previously that people living with disability in Fiji, previously they have been left out in some of these trainings to respond to crises. And I was wondering if there's similar programs being run for people with disability and by people with disability in Samoa.
So our TOT that we held last week was we had a call to action to ensure that the climate services are inclusive information. And from there on, we also found out that the information that they've been disseminated are not inclusive to the disability group. So that is something for us that we are trying to work on. We are actually working on is to make sure that we have trained people in the climate services or have them link with the disability group to make sure that the information sent out is inclusive of the disability group. That is something we are working on. We have yet to in our caring project, we are working on, basic care for all types of people, especially the children and the people with disability. So it's just the basic caring tools that we are working on and the skills that we are working on to make sure that the people, have jobs to go to and that the disability or no one is left behind as well in the service that we do.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ramona. I would like to take this opportunity to invite Helena Seneka, who is calling in from Papua New Guinea. Bit of I think, apologies for any technical issues that you've experienced, Helena. Would you like to say hello to our participants here today, Helena? Helena, just checking in that you are there.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi everyone.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. I hope everyone's well today.
Helena, would you like to introduce yourself to the group today?
Okay. Hi everyone. I'm Helena. project officer. And,
All right, thank you so much. Just to let you know, Helena, the video, the sound quality isn't very good. So you might have to turn off your video just to improve the quality. Okay, thank you. Helena, I have a couple of questions that I've already asked Lucille and Ramona. You know, Helena, you are a young woman in Papua New Guinea, representing YWCA. Would you be able to share some examples of how young women's leadership has been important to in response to crises in Papua New Guinea?
Hello?
Yes, can hear you fine, Helena.
Okay. So you were asking if I could tell you all about the growing movement of young women leaders driving climate change action in PNG.
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So for young women around PNG, a lot of them are taking lead in driving climate action at different levels in their respective roles. A recent example for us here in PNG would be our Young Women Climate Change TOT that we had recently, and also the regional consultation session, which saw the attendance of different young women leaders from different communities, organizations, and also including the Assembly of Persons with Disability. I guess the biggest barrier is that for these initiatives is that there is no proper recognition. There is a lack in a bottom-up approach in order for young women's voices to be heard, and in that matter, like to be heard correctly. Not enough funding and resources for these initiatives to be more effective and supported, especially for young women with disability. The more we involve young women and girls, inclusive of persons with disability, to participate in planning and decision-making processes at all levels of conversation, we empower them to become confident leaders. And also, nothing about young women without young women. I mean, how can you discuss or address issues or challenges that a young woman may be facing if they are not included? Also, persons with disability are not included in those conversations. As my SUSAs here in PNG have said, my voice matters. Hear me and hear me correctly.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much, Helena. You know, Helena, I think you've touched a bit about how it's been a challenge for young women in PNG to organize when there isn't enough funding to support grassroots movements. What are some of your hopes and dreams for young women leaders in PNG for 2021?
I guess more involvement of young women at decision-making levels, and also like because we had a recent visit to our climate services, climate weather office, and like they also pointed out that, like, you know, they realize that their messaging or the information that they give out is not so inclusive as what like we've been driving through Shift in the Power Coalition. So I guess going forward, young women should be included in decision making and planning, and also be more inclusive of persons with disability, and yeah, basically inclusive of everyone, especially the vulnerable.
Absolutely. And Lucille, what about yourself? What are your hopes and dreams for the young women of Fiji?
Thank you. As a rural young woman, my hopes for a better world, a better Fiji would be seeing the world free of COVID-19, and not forgetting its teachings of hygiene and being with family. My dream is to see young women at the forefront of decision-making levels with equal access and justice. And a reset would be seeing the world recover from environment and climate change.
And Ramona, what about yourself? Hopes and dreams for the young women of Samoa?
Hello. So my dream, or our dreams from Samoa, is for all the women to have full access information to any information, from private services to health services and human rights services, you know, all that work that we have been doing. We make sure that we are the first respondents, and that we are resourced to be able to carry out these hopes and dreams. So we pray that we will have so much funding to source us at this very time. And we are praying as a Christian country to wipe away this COVID very soon and have our people up and going again very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Ramona. Ramona, if you could just share one word about what you wish about 2021, what would that word be?
Rise up.
Rise up. Fantastic.
Mm.
And Helena, what about your one word for your wish for 2021?
I have a lot of words, but I would say inclusivity.
Fantastic. And Lucille, one word for 2021?
Resilience.
Oh, that's beautiful. Actually, could you hold that up for a second so that we can take a lovely photo of that?
Mm-hmm.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lucille. So participants of the webinar, I'd like to invite you to also share one word that you'd like to see come true in 2021 in the chat box. And please join me in thanking our wonderful speakers, Lucille, Helena, and Ramona, who are calling in from Fiji, Samoa, and PNG. It's been a real pleasure having the three of you join us today. Thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and knowledge with us. The Shifting the Power Coalition is such a wonderful and powerful force because of the leadership of young women like yourselves. So on behalf of everyone on the call, we want to thank you so much for your leadership. And to our participants who have joined us today from across Australia and across the world, I'd like to invite you to visit actionaid.org.au/Giving Day. The URL is in the chat box. Every dollar that you donate today will be matched by a generous supporter, and all funds will be used to invest in women leaders such as Lucille, Ramona, and Helena. Thank you again so much for joining us today, and I hope to see you all very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
God bless.